Hello everyone. We're going to be continuing with our lecture series on the avant-garde. It's a series of lectures that explore avant-garde practices, and those take on many forms. The last lecture we looked at was Surrealism. It was at one point an avant-garde movement because it was doing something that hadn't been done before. It's become a style. Ultimately, everything that's pioneering and new ends up becoming a style. Last lesson we looked at Surrealism in art. Now we're going to look at Surrealism in music, if you can say that that exists. Surrealism, an avant-garde movement that began in the early 20th century, sought to unlock the creative potential of the unconscious mind through dreamlike and irrational juxtapositions. Irrational juxtapositions. Juxtapositions are basically the combination of two opposing things. Can you get an irrational one? Surrealism emerged alongside its visual and literary counterparts. So we looked at the visual counterpart in the last lesson, and it emerged alongside these other artistic counterparts in the 1920s and 1930s. It was influenced by the works of André Breton and other Surrealist leaders. Check out the last video for information about that. While the movement was initially more prominent in visual arts and literature, it gradually found its way into the musical domain, with composers and musicians seeking to translate the movement's principles into sound. Okay, let's look at some key characteristics and techniques. I looked at this last lesson as well. We have dreamlike atmospheres. Surrealist music often aims to create an otherworldly or dreamlike atmosphere using unconventional harmonies, unusual scales, and innovative orchestration to evoke a sense of the uncanny. There's a really great article about the uncanny by Freud called Heimlich und Unheimlich, or is it just called Unheimlich? It's really interesting. It unpacks etymologically how the uncanny bleeds into the canny, etymologically speaking. So the history of the words and how it developed in different languages. For instance, you can be roughly translated into familiarity and unfamiliarity. If something's familiar, it's homely, of the home, heimlich, cozy. But at the same time, homely could be seen as hidden off from the rest of the world, behind closed doors. And that's why canny and uncanny are just to do with unfamiliarity in the familiarity. Anyway, then we have automatism and improvisation. Reflecting the surrealist technique of automatic writing, musicians employed improvisation and spontaneous composition to bypass rational thought and tap into the unconscious mind. Unexpected juxtapositions. Surrealist music frequently features unexpected and disjointed elements such as abrupt changes in tempo, bizarre instrumental combinations, and incongruous sound effects. So although there's not a surrealist musical genre, you can say that during this time when people were being surrealist and thinking about automatism, juxtapositions, the psyche, the uncanny, these things were present in music. We can talk about correlations between things, not necessarily causations. But humans develop as a collective based on their context, and we're all just trying to express ourselves in different ways. Surrealist compositions often incorporate symbolic references and hidden meanings, aiming to provoke thought and elicit deeper psychological responses from the listener. But then again, you have this throughout the whole history of music. Like, even in medieval music, people were referencing golden mean ratios in the music and trying to match the architecture of churches because it was heaven to them, and they were creating heaven in the sound. So this happens all the way to the very beginning. In the classical and romantic era, you had people quoting folk songs, and symbolism isn't necessarily restricted to surrealism, but depending on the context, you could argue that it's a surrealist technique. Of the time surrounding surrealism, when surrealism was prominent, this is what music was doing. We have Edgard Varèse, known for his experimental approach to sound. Varèse's works, such as ionization, utilized unconventional instrumentation to create surreal auditory experiences. Again, is it surreal? Well, technically it is surreal. It's manufactured reality. More obviously, you get surrealism in jazz and popular music, and I think this is where it flourished more, mainly in the concepts that were explored. Yes, at the time in classical music, experimentation was being explored more. There were juxtapositions, chants, indeterminacy, and you could say that's just merely avant-garde, but at the same time surrealism was occurring. And when we explore literature in the next video, this will all become clearer, because I think it's important to think about what was going on surrounding different artistic movements and the developments of it in order to get a clear understanding of why people were doing what they were doing. In jazz, elements of surrealism can be seen in the work of Duke Ellington, whose compositions like the Afro-Eurasian Eclipse feature dream-like, unconventional structures and unexpected instrumental juxtapositions. Very typical of jazz though, but jazz was developing at the same time and moving beyond something more uniform and structured to more experimentation, improvisation, automatic you could argue. It's all about connecting with the psyche, the soul, and playing freely while still following the rules of jazz. John Coltrane. Coltrane's later works, such as A Love Supreme, explore transcendental and spiritual themes, incorporating improvisation and elements that evoke a sense of the mystical and surreal. And then we have the Beatles. It's more obvious how surreal they are because even some of their lyrics, if you just listen to it, people could say that, yeah, it's influenced a bit by the drugs that were being taken, but a lot of artistic movements are influenced by drugs. Even in the Romantic era, if you think back to Coleridge, opium influenced a lot of what was being written about. Later albums, especially Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Magical Mystery Tour, exhibit surrealist influences through their psychedelic sounds, unconventional song structures, and lyrics inspired by dream imagery. And then we have Frank Zappa. He's known for his eclectic and often surreal compositions. Zappa's work defies traditional genres and incorporates absurdity, satire, and complex musical structures reminiscent of surrealist art, you could say. So that's surrealism in music. I think it came to the fore more in the popular music genres. Surrealism's influence on music has been profound, encouraging composers and musicians to break free from conventional forms and explore the depths of the unconscious mind. The movement's emphasis on dreams, spontaneity, irrationality has inspired a wide range of experimental and avant-garde musical practices. In contemporary music, surrealist principles continue to resonate in genres such as ambient, experimental, and electronic music. And again, popular music mainly, so artists like Aphex Twin, Björk, and Radiohead have incorporated elements of surrealism into their work, using innovative sound design and unconventional structures to create immersive and dreamlike auditory experiences. But you could argue as well that they are influenced by maybe the electronic avant-garde movements that occurred. We have other things that happened as well at the same time. There was the film music developing. If you think about Doctor Who, the BBC, what are they called? The Radiophonic Workshop, for instance. More experimental sonic exploration was going on there. People were interested in sci-fi more in films, so these sounds are being explored. So it all kind of feeds into each other. So surrealism's not a clear-cut one. Surrealism in music is difficult because music in and of itself has always been quite surreal. Surrealism in music, it could be argued, manifested through the creation of dreamlike atmospheres, but then again, you had Impressionism that did that. We also had the use of improvisation and automatism, again, chance music, indeterminacy, we just describe it like that. Then we had the incorporation of juxtapositions and symbolic meanings. Again, symbolic meanings, they've occurred throughout the whole history of music as far as I am aware. It depends on the context. You could combine all these things, and if you intend to do something surreal, then you've done something surreal. But surrealism has had a lasting legacy on art in general and the development of it, and it continues to inspire, potentially, musicians to explore the boundaries of sound and the depths of the human psyche more, you could argue. But then again, you could say the correlation here lies with the rise in psychoanalysis. So, thank you for watching. This has just been a bit about surrealism. Just something to start a conversation. Bye!